I will hopefully give you lots of time to talk. The people in the back will tell me if I'm talking too long, because sometimes that happens. Right, guys in the back? I'm going to start out, we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. So I'm going to start out with telling you some hard things. But just know in the end, you'll feel better. It'll be great in the end. So how many of you have ever had what I like to call, and what I call at home, a mommy meltdown? If your hand's not raised, you're a liar. So we call them mommy meltdowns, we call them mommy freakouts, because they just happen sometimes. It's better if you just pull the elephant right into the room and say that was a thing that happened. So probably one of the most memorable to me, and by the way, I asked my 13-year-old if he remembered any of them. That was interesting. I won't tell you what he said. But the one that stands out to me instantly was the one where I don't even know why I did this. I cannot remember what happened. That doesn't matter. I threw a cheeseburger with ketchup on it across my kitchen at my kid who was sitting in his high chair. And I do think I was aiming for him, but I did hit the wall. So there you go. That's mine. So if we needed a level playing field, there it is. That is one of many things that I've done, but that one was probably the most decorative. So for us as moms, we often enter into that I think we see it as a job, right? Parenting is a job. It's a job that we do. Except for it's like a job you can't quit. You can never quit. And you can try to quit, but I wouldn't recommend it. But for those of us who, just to be real serious for a minute, for those of us who have been in situations where maybe we had a mom who did quit, that's still your mom, right? So my mom has that situation where her mom left their home when she was 12, and she didn't see her for a lot of years. That didn't make her any less of her mom. So for you right now, the responsibility is not a job. It's actually a role, which is different. It's not a job. It's not a thing that you pick up and you put down. Once you become a mom, there's no going back to not being a mom. For those of you who are parenting babies, a whole new set of things, a whole new set of values, a whole new set of what in the world has just entered into your life, and everything from sleep that you never knew how much you appreciated and is now gone seemingly forever, it's not, to those of you who are on the way other end of that, very close to, how many of you are in high school where you're an empty nester, or you got college age kids, you're somewhere in that range. You have a whole, it doesn't matter whether they're living in your house or not, you're still their parent, you're still their mom. There's a whole different set of realities, a whole different set of, I'll call it fears, worries that accompany you on a daily basis. Everywhere you go, your kids go with you. You're always walking around with them on your heart. Those of you in this room who may not have thrown a cheeseburger, you've all at some point messed something up in a way that you wish 5 minutes later you could go back and have a do-over. Maybe the next day you could have a do-over. Maybe it's still nagging at you. But all of us at some point in time have messed things up. So today, what I want you to leave with is knowing, what do I do with those things that I feel like were mess-ups? How do I get to the place where I can feel like it's okay for me to sometimes mess up and there's still grace for me, and I'm not going to ruin everything about my kid, especially those of you who have babies who think, man, if I make the 5 set of wrong mistakes, is that going to end up in a place that I never would have hoped for my child? Or if you're on the other end of that and your child is not where you thought he or she would be, how much do you blame yourself for that? When you leave here today, what I hope you will feel is relieved from that. I hope you will not take that as a burden. I hope that will stay here and it will not leave this room with you. That's what I'm going to task you with. But first, I'm going to need you to better understand your role a little bit. If you haven't actually had those thoughts or those feelings of regret yet, or you haven't dealt with it, I know that the reality is that they're there. They're just below the surface. If we really, really stop to think about it, we worry more about what's going to happen than what maybe is happening in the moment, right? When we wonder if we'll ever sleep again. We wonder if they'll actually pass school this year, if they'll really get out of that teacher's class. Will they actually go to college? Will they ever get their driver's license? Will they ever come home on time? All of those things are worries, and every single one of them we attach to something about ourselves, if we're really, really being honest. Before I go any further, I want to show you the people who have me the most worried, if this thing will work. So those are my boys. I know one of them looks as beautiful as a girl, but that is Sept. He is 13, and then Brady, his brother, is 10. Brady is my little football player, and I generally would not stand up and teach you or teach anyone wearing my football gear, but there's a point to that. A lot of what you're going to hear today is about Brady because I feel like he's probably too young to go back and watch this, so he's safe. So I'm going to tell you a lot about Brady and what it is that God taught me as I was preparing for this talk today. I want us to leave here knowing that the chief reason that God put parents in children's lives is so that they would know Him, not so that they would accomplish certain things or be successful or graduate from high school even. You might actually have a situation where your child was born with some sort of special need you never planned for. That's a reality for a lot of people. That child is no less a child and you're no less a parent because of that. That's just a different reality than the one that you had pictured. Every single person in this room parents so that your child can know and understand who God is and can understand what God's grace means for their life. Because truthfully, if it's your job to control the outcome of who that child becomes, you are really, really going to be set up to fail. You are really going to be basing your identity off of a person who was born a sinner. You know it. Think about your kids right now. You can barely control their bodily functions, let alone what's going to end up happening to them. And so what you need to be able to do is remove yourself from trying to control their identity or your own through them. If you look on your table right now, your notes are, and I told them before, if I forget a blank, just tell me. Because that is something that would be obnoxious to me, but I always do it, I forget a blank. So your notes right here are the things that I want you to pull out of this and be able to take with you as you go. There are some hard realities that you have to face before you can get to the place where you are no longer finding your identity in your kid, and your kid is not finding their identity out of what it is that you're trying to base for them. So I'm going to tell you some things right now that might be hard to hear, but I want you to know that God worked me over as I was preparing for this, and I had to actually deal with these things as realities too. And by the way, I never have thoughts that are genuinely my own. Most of these come from this book, which is a really, really great book, and Patty's going to reference it for you in an email following this, so that you can order it yourself if you would like. But this is a really super book. There's so much in there that I can't read it all at one time. I have to read a chapter and then come back to it. So a lot of what you're going to hear today comes out of the introduction to that book. So, hard reality number 1, you aren't enough. There's a blank on your paper for this. First reality is, I know, that's really, really encouraging, isn't it, to know that you're not enough? The first reality is that even though God's grace is sufficient for us, you actually are not enough to be able to do whatever it is that you have in your head needs to be done for your kid. It's not expected of you. You don't need to do it on your own. You're not going to be enough to be able to control the outcome of what happens in your kid's life. Secondly, your imagination is actually too small. I'm going to describe an adult for you. This adult, who is not your son, lives in the woods, wears clothes made out of animal hair, survives off of a diet made out of bugs, and spends most of his time hanging out in the water. Is that what you would picture for your son? I just described John the Baptist. So there are things that you might control out of your kid that actually would lead to them being somebody who could change history. We could go into Moses' story. Moses, great leader Moses, frees all of the Israelites, killed somebody, started out in a situation you never would have thought he would have been in, killed somebody, doubted himself, argued with God, all the things that you wouldn't have wanted your child to have done when they became an adult, Moses did. There are countless stories of like that in the Bible. So your imagination is possibly too small about what your kid could become. And then your results are already skewed because you have a sinner living in your house. That sinner that was born into your home is actually completely out of your control. In the beginning, yes, you can control some of the things that happen, but the results are already going to be skewed. The only thing that you can do is to begin to release now the ideas and the approach and the outcomes that you think are going to happen. And I'm going to ask that you change your mindset from being an owner to thinking more like an ambassador. What an ambassador's job is to represent the leader who has sent them to another country. In this case, if you are trying to parent your child through what the Bible teaches is the way to parent, then who has sent you is God. You have been sent to represent God. You are an ambassador of God in your child's life. Now, that might not be everybody in this room. So those of you who are not trying to parent your child in that way, and that's a brand new concept for you, I want to address that for just a second. The only thing that an ambassador does is to faithfully represent the leader who has sent him. Parents who approach their child's life as a representative don't find their identity in being a parent. So here's the irony. I wore this shirt today, my football mom shirt. It actually has my kid's name on the back and his number that used to be his number. It actually matches another kid's number on the team right now who's better at playing football than my kid. So my son Brady actually, and I'm not going to talk about this when we do Parent Hub Live after this, he's actually not good at football. He loves football a lot, and there are some aspects of football that he's good at. He's actually really good at throwing the football. He always has been. I thought he was going to be really great at football. I was really excited about him when he was 2. For some of the people who volunteered in Kid City and would give him a football, I would get these, oh, he's so great at throwing a football, and I thought he was going to be really great. He was going to be so excited. It was tailgating in my future so much. Goodness. Brady's not good at football, but he loves it. And he looks adorable when he's playing football. But the irony is I had to come to the place, I know this sounds so silly, where I had to be okay not just with him not being great at football. I had to be okay with it being okay with him to be mediocre at something. Because he wouldn't try hard, and he still doesn't try hard. And I don't know why he doesn't try hard. But I had to come to the place where I had to say, that's not me out there wearing those pads and putting that helmet on. That's him. And you know what? There's a lot of things that he is good at, but I'll talk about those in a minute. What you are called to represent to your child is grace, not the desire for them to become something. You're not trying to get them to do a thing, to change into a thing. You are not trying to control the outcome of where they go. You are just supposed to represent grace for your child. Now, it's going to be impossible for you to be able to do that if you don't understand a little bit about what that looks like. What does it look like? These sound like big churchy terms. These are buzzwords. Sure, we'll embody grace. We'll be gracious. Does that mean that when I tell them they can't have something, then 5 minutes later I tell them that they can, and that's grace? No. Sometimes, but no, mostly not. I'm going to show you an example of somebody who did a really, really great job of this, and one of my favorite stories in the Bible. And so that you did not have to look it up, it's actually on your sheet, so we're going to read it together. If you've ever heard the story of the lost son or the prodigal son before, I'm going to have you look at it, and I want you to really, really look at how this father responds to his son, who he clearly has spent a lot of time investing in throughout his life. Jesus is telling the story. It says, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger son spoke to his father, and he said, Father, give me my share of the family property. So the father said, No. He said he divided his property between his 2 sons. Not long after that, the younger son packed up all he had. Then he left for a country far away. There he wasted his money on wild living. He spent everything he had. Then the whole country ran low on food, so the son didn't have what he needed. He went to work for someone who lived in that country. That person sent the son to the fields to feed the pigs. The son wanted to fill his stomach with the food the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Then he began to think clearly again, and he said, How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough food? But here I am dying from hunger. I will get up and go back to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and I have sinned against you. I am no longer fit to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. While the son was still a long way off, his father saw him. He was filled with tender love for his son. He ran to him, he threw his arms around him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer fit to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattest calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. This son of mine was dead, and now he is alive again. He was lost, and now he's found. So they began to celebrate. The older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked what was going on. Your brother has come home, the servant replied. Your father has killed the fattest calf. He has done this because your brother is back, safe and sound. The older brother became angry. He refused to go in. So his father went out and begged him. But he answered his father, Look, all these years I've worked like a slave for you. I've always obeyed your orders. You never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But this son of yours wasted your money with some prostitutes, and now he comes home, and for him you kill the fattest calf. My son, the father said, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead, and now he is alive again. He was lost, and now he is found. The Father in this story had how many sons? 2. Father clearly has plenty to give, plenty to provide. When he's approached by his younger son and asked for his inheritance, essentially, he doesn't just give his younger son the inheritance. What does he also do? Somebody say it. Give it to the older one too. Just goes ahead and just divvies it out. Goes ahead and gives the inheritance out. Younger son goes off. If you know the story, we just read it, he's gone. Life gets worse and worse and worse. And when he gets to rock bottom, what is his first thing that he thinks to do? Go home. That's right. And his father's response, and there's other versions of this story where they show that the entire time his father has been waiting, he's been watching the road for him to come back. His reception of him has nothing that looks like admonishment in it. Nothing that looks like, where have you been? Nothing that looks like, what did you do with my money? There are no questions. There's only a reception. And we actually have, so I used to be an English teacher, you actually get to see inside this character's mind. You get some indirect characterization here where you get to see inside the younger son's mind where he says, hey, here's what I'm basing this off of. My father treats his servants really well. And if I go back to him and I say these things, he'll receive me. Confident, full confidence. You don't get to hear any doubt in that. And so he goes, and that's exactly what happens. Older son, his response is not what you would expect, having been raised by that really great dad. Now he's mad because he feels like he hasn't been given anything. At the beginning of the story, he got the other half. And he's been there the whole time, reaping whatever it is that he hasn't sown while he's been with his father. So this great dad has 2 sons who clearly did not turn out the way that he would have hoped they would in the very beginning. But in the end, does that change who he is? No, because this father has demonstrated that he understands what grace actually looks like. Even in the case of his older brother, he doesn't scold or rebuke him. He only explains what it is that he's doing. And then he moves on and has the celebration anyway. So how do we make this practical to our lives? Practically speaking, because I don't want you to leave here and feel like there's not a way for you to be able to take and replicate this. What this father does is he's a coach. Now, there's going to be quite a few football metaphors. That is my life right now, okay? So what this father does is he demonstrates what it means to be a great coach. When we very first start out with our kids, we're with them. We're in it all the time because they have no choice. They're blobs. They can't do anything for themselves, okay? And that eventually gets to the place where more and more we're off the field, a little further off the field, and then it reaches a point, if your kids play football, where the coach is no longer allowed on the field. All they can hope for is that the plays that they taught the kids during practice and the things that they shared with them and that all the rules they've been over and over again actually come out on the field. And they can speak to them in huddles, and they can speak to them in the middle of the game, and they can talk to them about what happened after the game, but they can't be right there beside them. That's what life becomes like for us as parents, too. We're further and further away, but we're still close by, and we're a coach. What this father does, and what he clearly has done, is he has coached really well. Now, if you are a coach of a team, right now, if someone came and they asked me to coach synchronized swimming, I would be a terrible synchronized swimming coach. I don't like wearing swimsuits. I don't like getting in pools. I feel nasty just thinking about it. And I definitely don't like being under the water for long amounts of time. I would be a terrible synchronized swimming coach. Is that a thing? I think it's got to be a thing, right? They do everything all in unison. It's got to be a thing. If you are a coach of something, you cannot be a good coach if you don't understand what the rules are. If you're going to coach a football team, you have to be able to call plays. You have to be able to say those ridiculous things like Thunderbird 24, take a right, I don't know. But you have to be able to say those things and have it make sense to other people. If you haven't read the rule book, you can't do that. If you haven't played the game a little bit yourself, you might be good at it, but you won't be great at it. In order for you to be a great coach, in order for you to be able to demonstrate what grace is in a way that your child can understand when you're off on the sidelines or they're playing at a different field, you have to have been able to experience that yourself. And here's where I want to hit pause. This is where I said I was going to address some of you who might not actually be attempting to parent this way, because it might not be a way that you've heard before. If you're in this room right now and you have not experienced the grace that was that younger brother's, if you have been off in another country, in another land, and do not know that there is a father who has been waiting on a road for you to come down the road, with no questions, with no hints at any sort of feeling about you or what it is that you've done, no rebukes, nothing, only grace, only huge celebration because you came home. If you've never heard that before, That grace is free. That's why it's grace. And it's yours. And you won't possibly be able to parent outside of your own identity. You won't possibly be able to try to change someone else's identity if you don't identify with that grace first. It is yours to be had, and you cannot share it with anyone else until you fully understand it. There's a couple of stories in the Bible where you see this demonstrated super well. When there's a woman at the well who approaches Jesus, and he actually tells her that he recognizes that she has had 5 husbands, and this is something that she's been criticized for and felt shame for, and he says, no, I know this about your life, and I don't care. I want to give you living water. When there's a woman who's brought to him who's been caught in adultery, and all the people who rush towards her and rush towards him have stones in their hands and they're ready to kill her, that story ends with Jesus saying, if anyone here can say that they haven't committed a sin, then you throw the first stone. And if you know that story, you know eventually one by one all the stones fall until it's only her that's left. And what is it that he says to her? Go and sin no more. He didn't ask her to tell him the story. He didn't have her seek counseling. There was nothing after that. It was literally, you're clean, you're free. And this same woman at some point in time encounters Jesus again, and all she can do is weep. All she can do is love him more because of how much he has loved her and how free that grace was. That grace is all of ours. And so the first step for you would be, before you ever try to do anything that pertains to your child, you separate from you as mom, you as whoever it is that you are, just you. God knows you and is waiting on the road for you and wants you to have that grace. So don't leave here today without talking to somebody about what that could mean for you. Maybe that's what you needed to hear. Maybe as a parent you feel like you need some grace because you actually never really have operated like you had some within yourself. But though you had a relationship with Jesus, you haven't operated like you had grace for yourself, and therefore it's been difficult for you to have it with someone else. Please don't leave here today without talking to somebody about that. This father, as a coach, does understand that grace clearly because he's able to give it so freely. The other thing that he's able to do that is required of us practically is to be a fan. So, if you are someone's fan, what does that mean you need to do to be a good fan? Know what? Yes. Can't be a good fan if you don't know the person, right? What else might you know if you're someone's good fan, their biggest fan? That's right. You show up for stuff. Very good. You should read my slides. You show up for stuff. What else? You encourage. How many of you have a kid who plays a sport and you embarrass them because of how much you cheer? That is true. No, they're not embarrassed by it, but you can hear it all over the field. Yeah, you show up, you cheer loudly. You know, anybody in here? I know this is a stretch. Play fantasy football. I love fantasy football. It takes over my life, so I can't do it because I get all into it, and I watch football differently because then I'm rooting for the teams I don't like because they have players on anyway. So if you are a fan of somebody, you show up, you make sure they know it. When I wear this shirt to church, my son is so excited because I kept it on and I wore it to church. And he just knows I'm just like a walk-in advertisement for how proud I am of him, and he loves that. We just bought, actually, his brother one that says Football Brother on it. I have no idea how he's going to feel about that, but we got it for him. And so when you're a fan of somebody, you study them. You're a student of that person. And you learn what it is that they like and what it is that they like to do and what it is what you can celebrate about them. And then the last thing is you're a soft place to land. So this isn't like, I don't know how many of you heard Chase's message this last weekend. It was like 80s, 90s, something like that. It's not that, but it's going to be easy to remember because it's be a coach, be a fan, be a soft place to land. You like that? So be a soft place to land. We all need that in life. We need this place where we can go and we can just crash. We need this place where we can go and know that we're going to be accepted no matter what it is that we've done. And clearly that's what the Father was for his Son in this story. So if you are, oh man, sorry guys, we said some of these things. There you go. What you need to be rescued from in order to be able to do this for somebody else is not your sin. Don't write that in the blank. It's not what you've done. It's not the regrets that you have. It's not the mistake that you made this morning. It's not the cheeseburger that you threw against the wall. What you have to be rescued from is you. It's just yourself. It's just you getting in the way of being able to show somebody else grace. God's grace frees you from that, though. It liberates you from the prison of regret, and it welcomes you to fresh starts and new beginnings. This book, I'm going to read a short paragraph out of it that describes what I think it does a great job of putting to words the regrets that we're afraid that we're going to have. So, sets the stage right here in the introduction for a parent who has a senior in high school. So those of you who have babies, you've thought some of these things. Maybe they haven't been put into words. Those of you who are on the other end, you may actually be living in this reality. But as parent sits and waits for senior in high school to come home and meet their curfew, this is the situation as this mom sits in the dark. It says, you're haunted by regret. You don't want to be, but you are. Not about anything big, just all the little moments of failure. You remember the little promises you made that you got too busy to keep. The moments that you yelled. Maybe I did that today, I don't know. When you should have been listening. You remember how hard it is to have children and be fair and how often you failed. You remember falling asleep at recitals and hoping they never knew. You remember making ridiculous threats and hoping they don't remember them as well as you do. You remember the time that you stopped the minivan, made them all get out and told them you wouldn't let them back in until they could get along. You remember that it was easier to announce the law than to give grace. You'd like to be free of regret, but you're not. Everything that's just been described is unifying in all these scenarios is that they're about a calling. One of the most significant callings that could ever be laid in the lap of a human being. If you would stop and think about its ramifications, it would make you run away unless it already had made you too weak in the knees. In a way, it's insane for anyone to actually think that they could take this on. If you understand, though, that there's grace, you don't have to take those things on. You get out of your own way, and none of those things matter. Sorry, guys, my slides are actually, I don't know what happened, but they got in the right order. They got in the wrong order. A great fan is where I'm going. Here we go. You have to celebrate who your kid actually is. So I told you already that Brady is not a great football player, but he loves to play football. If he loves to play football, I love him playing football, and I celebrate that. But if you're a student of your kid and you're really caring about what it is, who it is that God made your kid to be, then take the time to stop and pause. Now, those of you who have babies, you'll get there. Being a fan of your kid right now means not feeling like it's the end of the world every single time they wake you up, but just going and knowing that at some point that won't be the case anymore. But being a fan of who your kid is, your kid actually may have some interests that you don't have and that you're never going to develop. My older son plays ultimate frisbee, and he loves it. I don't understand it, but he really, really cares about it a lot. This is who Brady believes that he is. But who Brady really is, if I'm celebrating, is this kid right here. Brady volunteers in our special needs ministry. This is something that God has put in him that he did not put in me. And it's not something that I pushed him to do. I never would have thought of it on my own. When I picked him up in carpool one afternoon last school year, he rides in a car with actually Diana's kids. And it came up in the car that Brady was always playing with this kid during recess. And they were asking about it, or talking to him about it, and as it turns out, it's a kid that no one else plays with, and he has special needs. I don't even know what that means in Brady's world, but here at church, that started to develop a lot too. It wasn't that he was going to saying to himself, I'm going to go and play with kids who have special needs. He was literally just playing with the kids that no one else was playing with. And it wasn't something, I should have been doing that. I should have been teaching him that he should enter a room and he should look for those kids, but I hadn't. It's just a way that God wired him, and it's not something he even pats himself on the back for, which is how I can know that God wired him for it. And so I celebrate that in him because it's a way that he is better than me. It's the thing that he thinks of naturally that I don't. And I've had parents come to me and say that Brady's interactions with their sons have made their kids feel like it's the first time that they were just a kid, that they had a friend who just wanted to play with them. So celebrate who your kid actually is, and celebrating who your kid actually is might mean that I'll get here in a second, it might mean that you actually have to create some opportunities for them to be able to live those things out once you realize what they are. If you have a kid who likes to serve, if you have a kid who likes to travel, is interested in that, then by the time they're in middle school and high school, definitely entertain the idea of them going on some mission trips. Put them in a place where they can develop empathy if that's a thing that seems like it matters to them a lot. If you have a kid who cares about gardening, go buy some dirt. If you have a kid who likes to play ultimate frisbee, buy frisbees. If you have a kid who likes to dance, get them some shoes. Find a class that they can take. If they like to cook, get in the kitchen with them, even if it's not a you thing. Be a fan of who it is that they are. Because the way that they're wired is the way that they're going to be able to hear and feel and see God's grace for them. And so celebrate them in that way. Being a soft place to land looks like this. It looks like being a steady responder. Okay? Steadily responding now while they're in preschool. Steadily responding when they say things and do things in middle school that you never felt were possible. Steadily responding in high school when they don't meet curfew and they don't do some of the things that you felt that they would do, and they definitely do some of the things that you felt they never would do. And steadily responding when it seems like it's personal and they seem like they're trying to hurt just you. Just be steady. That father, when he was asked for his inheritance, did not claim any ownership over that inheritance. Did not, in the story, I don't know what really happened, but he didn't ask any questions in this story. He just gave it. All right, that's what you want. Steady response. Leverage some of the times that you actually have an opportunity to talk to your kids to set up some of those steady responses. So I won't tell you which one of my kids, but one of them has a struggle with truth telling. And so what happens in that situation, I get really, really upset, but I've had to learn that if I am getting upset now at their ages of 13 and 10, like through the roof upset over this, the lies and the things that are going to get hidden are going to get bigger. And if I can't demonstrate that I can handle this now, I won't be told those things later. And it's not a matter of I want their secrets, it's a matter of I want to be the soft place to land. Because if you go and you look for it somewhere else, there's no telling if you'll first of all find it, and second of all, what sort of advice that person will give them, and whether or not it will be filled with grace. And so I need to be able to be that soft place to land right now. For those of you who have younger kids in the room, one of the best places and the best times in your day to be able to teach this is bedtime. Kids don't want to go to bed. And so they will do anything and come up with any way to try to stay up. So if that means getting a chance to talk to you, leverage it. Spend some time talking to them. Allow it to be wide open, and you will be amazed at the things that they will say so that they don't have to go to sleep. It's truly beautiful, very manipulative, but it really does work. And in those moments, train yourself to respond well. So with one of my kids, this happened. He did something that I felt like he wasn't telling the truth about, and I couldn't get him to break. I tried to break him, but I couldn't get him to break. And so finally, I just had to say, you know what? I choose to believe you. I'm just going to choose it. I'm going to choose to believe you. And he started to cry. And I still think he's lying. But I said, I'm going to choose to believe you. I don't even want us to talk about this anymore. There's nothing that I can do. I want you to know that from this point forward, I will not mention this incident again. If this or something else comes up, I said, if I leave this room and this actually wasn't, you're not telling me the truth, you're probably still going to continue to feel bad. But I'm not going to feel bad about it anymore because I'm choosing to believe you. If you allow a lot of those things to build up, that bad feeling, it's just not going to go away. It's going to get worse. I want you to know that you can come and you can talk to me about those things. And even if I seem like I'm frustrated, I'm going to work through it because I might have to pray about it, but I'm going to work through it. And then I waited for just like 3 seconds. It wasn't long enough. It was actually way faster than I thought. And he said, well, actually, since you said that, one time in 3rd grade, my friend and I thought it would be cool if we started using bad words. Okay. He said, so then we started doing it a lot. Okay. Okay. And then it started this floodgate of things that honestly broke my heart. They weren't major things. They were kid things. They were childlike. But he had been holding on to them, some of them for 2 years. He went back to 2nd grade and started telling me stuff from 2nd grade that was no big deal, but it was a big deal to him, to where they came up really, really fast. And guys, I don't always get it right, but in that moment, I literally did pray to myself, how do I respond to this? This is a lot of stuff. And God said, tell him you're glad he told you. So that's all I said. I'm glad you told me. And for your kids, when they come to you with something like that, even if it breaks your heart, there's going to be times where you just need to say, I'm glad you told me, because truthfully, it's not your struggle anyway. It's not your crisis. It's not personal. It's not against you. You just have to be glad that you were the soft place to land and not someone else. So your personal response to grace is also going to matter a ton. And here's the fastest way to that and the most practical, because I'm running out of time here. Your personal response to grace, so the way that you interact with God's grace that he has for you, the way that you handle your mistakes. So this one hurt me a little bit as it came up. Guys, we're not perfect. Every single one of us in here is just as much a sinner as our kids. Every single one. And so when you mess up in front of your kids, because if you haven't yet, they just haven't noticed, because you have. And as they get older, they'll point it out. They'll point it out more often, more regularly will they do that. And they'll remind you of things that you said that actually apply to the thing that you just did, because it's the same lesson and you haven't learned it yet. And so when that happens, the best way you can teach your child grace is to apologize and to ask for their forgiveness. When you give them an opportunity to forgive you, you teach them what forgiveness looks like. And when you don't try to be perfect all the time. I would say the one thing that I walked away with has been one of my biggest struggles in life is perfectionism, because I never knew what it was like to be okay to fail. My parents really, I never really saw them mess anything up. It actually would have been helpful. My kids are way set up well. I never saw my parents mess up, so they never really had to apologize for anything. And so I didn't know what it looked like to be a mess up. I just thought, some people just don't, but I do, so I just must be a terrible human. They need to know that you mess up. In fact, apologize way ahead of them even getting to the point where they're reprimanding you for what you did to them. So your personal response to grace, and then your reputation. What I mean by that is, your kids are always watching you. The way that you interact with other people, the grace that you extend to other people in your life, they see that. That younger brother, when he went away with his inheritance and he's sitting in there with those pigs and he feels like it's the end of the world, he remembered how his father treated who? The servants. And that's how he knew it was okay to go back home. So the way that you interact with other people, don't underestimate how that actually directly impacts your relationship with your kids as well. That fear that we talked about you having in the beginning, I'm not telling you to not fear things. I'm not telling you to not fear regret creeping in on you. What I am telling you is, instead of letting it be something that's a monster that's trying to eat you alive, leverage it. Fear is a real emotion. It's an emotion that's given to us by God to have. But instead of just being afraid and just sitting there and stewing in that, regret is a waste of time. I think it's Andy Stanley here says, emotion fuels things that grab your attention. So that fear, it's got your attention. But intentionality fuels your decision to give certain things your attention. So once you realize that you're fearful that you're going to end up in a place of regret, well, I can go ahead and tell you now, regret is a waste of time. It's not going to fix anything. If you're in a situation that you wish wasn't the case, you can't fix it. And I know that's terrible, but you can't. You cannot change the outcome. You don't have that power. What you can do, though, is, and literally every single person in the room can do this, you can be intentional about what you do today, and it might not fix anything today, and honestly, guys, it might not fix anything ever, but it might. And what hangs in the balance is the possibility that it might. So your intentionality towards showing your kids grace and representing who Jesus is actually can begin to change things for them if you stay consistent with it. So be intentional. Really quickly, here's the ways that you can be intentional with your kids. First of all, start with yourself. If you don't spend time in God's Word, growing in your own relationship with Jesus, there's a great place to start. If you're not in a small group, if you don't have a group of people in your life who are encouraging you, if you attend this church, we have plenty of ways to get you connected. If you don't attend this church, we have plenty of ways to get you connected. We would love to get you connected to a group of people who want to encourage you specifically in that way. Start with yourself. And it might mean starting with a hard conversation with yourself and maybe with one other person about whether or not you have been able to receive grace. Next, be a bigger fan. You're already a fan in your heart. Be a bigger fan. Show it. Show up for things. Wear ridiculous shirts. Cheer loudly in the stands. Who cares if they roll their eyes? In the inside, they really do want you to do those things, even if they act like they don't. Be a big fan of who they are. Sign them up to serve. Sign up to serve with them. Go to the places that they like. Eat the foods that they like, even if they're just peanut butter and jelly. Be their fan, because the way that you interact with them teaches them how God wants to interact with them as well. You're the best representation they have of that. And then surrender the outcome. Forget how it's all going to work out. Don't spend any time today trying to figure out what it is that you're doing today and every conversation you're having. Is it going to make them or break them? Stop it. Surrender that. Don't try to figure that out for them. You can't figure it out anyways. God already has a plan in mind for them. Surrender the outcome for your kids. So today at your tables, you have some questions that you're going to work through with your mentor mom. If there's a way that you have actually seen some of these things come to life with your kids or in your home that I didn't mention, something practical that you've done, I can tell you that one of the ways, so when we talked, somebody said show up earlier, it was you. Well, one of the ways that you can be a fan for your kid, yes, is to show up. And that means a lot of different things. But showing up ahead of time, showing up ahead of when your kid needs you to show up, actually is a big deal too. So for those of you who have, this is going to be very specific encouragement that comes from my life experience. If you have a kid who is 5th grade or older, pull your calendar out and set dates with that kid. Set appointments with those kids and don't break them at all costs. Do everything that you can not to break them. Make that the exception, not the rule. And make sure if you do have to break it, you make it up as quickly as possible. Set an appointment time. And it can be something as simple as breakfast at your own table one morning a week, but they know that it's coming. Because what those kids do at that age is that becomes a place in their mind where they know they're going to get you. They're going to get your full attention. They're going to have a chance to talk to you. With your younger kids, just give yourself some grace here. You're going to get through it. And everything that you're doing right now does actually matter a ton, even if it feels like it doesn't. If you're in a situation where you identify more with the father whose kids have wandered away, and you have a prodigal situation on your hands, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. I want everyone to say that out loud. Say, it's not your fault. Say it louder. People need to hear it. It's not your fault. If you end up in that situation, it's not your fault. God has grace for you, and He has grace for your child and your children. And His grace extends way past what you possibly could have done or could do now to fix that situation. It's not your fault. Your responsibility is just to keep praying and just to keep trusting in God's promises and keep working on you, because there's a ton of grace for you that you haven't even uncovered yet. Keep working on yourself. So at your table right now, please be as open as you feel like you can be about how much you feel like you need that grace, you've experienced that grace, the things that you've done in your own home and with your own kids to try to represent the coach and the fan and the soft place to land. Talk about those things and leave today with some tips and some real things that you can try. Pick one thing today that you're going to do before you go out of here. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to pray for you first, though. God, thank you so much for this time today. Thank you for giving us a chance just to grapple again with who you are and what it is that you've done for us before we ever even knew to ask. And God, I pray that every mom in this room does know that when we do ask and we do need to hear those things again, when we do need to grapple with your grace and your mercy, God, that we feel it so strongly that there's really no way we can do anything but overflow with it, God. Lord, we need your mercies new every morning. So do our kids. We're never going to be enough, but you promise in your word that your grace is sufficient for us. And if it's sufficient for us, it's sufficient for all the things that we're going to face and all the things that you've called us to be. And God, you wouldn't have given us our kids if you didn't think that we were the one who was supposed to be the parent for that child. We are the best representative of you to that child, God. Lord, I pray that each woman here today feels encouraged that they are the one that you handpicked to be the parent and the mom of the kid that lives in their house, the children who live with them, God. I pray that you give them energy. I pray that you give them a chance to refuel, and I pray that you put other people in their lives to encourage them. I ask all these things in your